Alfajores. So I am your baking instructor and baking expert for the day, Chef Colette, a longtime Craftsy instructor. Very proud of that. So yeah, let's get started. So welcome and hello to everyone who's dropping into the chat. It's so great to see you. Welcome to the kitchen. I have a lot of things to talk about today. So let's just drive in. No, let's just dive in. So today I'm demoing the alfajore dough. I'm going to show you how to roll them out, how to cut them. And I also have some tips and techniques that are going to help you with your other, what should we call them? Our cut out cookie doughs, to make sure those edges are crisp and you get the shape that you want. So let's get started. All right, so why alfajores? Well, number one, if you've ever had one, and if you have, please put it in the chat. They are delicious. The cookie is a melt in your mouth, sort of shortbread-esque cookie that's filled with dulce de leche. And the great thing about this particular cookie is that it is the filling we can buy. And if we do decide to make it, it's very easy to take a can of condensed milk and turn it into dulce de leche. And there's a DIY recipe for that, along with the alfajore recipe. So first things first though, this cookie, and this is really for us as cookie bakers and cookie chefs, this is a great dough to train on because I have the ingredients right here. And this one, and if you're reading the recipe as I go, you'll see that instead of flour being the main ingredient, cornstarch is the main ingredient. So what does this mean? Well, cornstarch has no gluten, right? And the magic of gluten, as we know, creates a dough that really holds together. But cornstarch, the benefit of cornstarch in this dough is it creates a melt in the mouth texture. So the first thing we have to do is sift the flour and cornstarch together. We have to sift with this one. We can't get away with whisking. Though I do have a whisk on deck because I have an important point to make about the whole sifting versus whisking. Well, number one, the whisk, if you have a sifter like mine, the whisk will help you get ingredients through. But the quick point that I want to make about this is that sometimes when we're sifting, we'll have ingredients like salt or almond flour that don't go through the sifter. And we still need those ingredients. So what you want to do when everything is through the sifter and you still see maybe your salt or an ingredient that's too thick to go through, you dump it into your sifted ingredients, grab your whisk, and then get everything together, all right? So it's kind of a sift whisk combo. All right, so that's done. We don't need to worry about that. You'll notice the alfajore has a little bit of baking powder that helps with giving it a little bit of lift and light, and then it also has salt. And if you've ever wondered, why is there salt in a recipe that's supposed to be sweet? Well, the reason is it makes salt as an ingredient in our regular baked goods, not our breads, but our regular baked goods. It helps our ingredients taste a little less sweet, gives things a little bit of balance. All right, so that's done. In the mixer, I'm fitting it with the paddle attachment. And in the mixer, I'm gonna put in my room temperature butter, and that's about 70 degrees. Butter for creaming method, not that I'm gonna take its temperature, but that's about what we're going for. And we're looking for the butter to be softened, but not shiny and beginning to collapse on itself. If you let your butter sit out, or maybe it's a warm day or the kitchen happens to be warm and it begins to sort of kind of get super shiny and look like it's falling in on itself, soften fresh butter and use the over softened butter for cooking, because it won't quite work the same. Because what we need is this sugar to be able to cut air pockets into our butter. And if our butter is too soft, that's not what's going to happen. So I am adding my sugar. Now you may notice something a little different in this recipe, and this is something I've been teaching for years and years, and I learned from a master baker. He was probably the best baker of the 20th century, and I was lucky enough to study with him. This little tip: add your vanilla and your sugar with your butter and sugar for creaming method. And if you have any zest, like the alfajores, because that little bite of lemon zest, what that does is it sort of balances the sweet of the dulce de leche and give us just a little bit of a relief on our palate from the sweetness. That should go in with the butter and sugar, because fat carries flavor. And long-time students of mine, I know you're like, there she goes again, because I try to teach this every chance I get. I see questions in the chat. I don't have questions yet, but I see where people are logging on from, and that's so exciting. So we'll get to questions in a second. So let me just recap. I have the butter, perfectly softened 70-degree butter, my sugar, my vanilla, and my lemon. And I've explained, instead of adding the vanilla in with the eggs, I'm adding it now so that flavor can permeate into the air pockets the sugar is creating as the mixer is going, and then we have this flavor evenly dispersed. I guarantee you, if you adopt this method, your product will be better. And it can be your secret. You don't need to tell anybody. That'll just be the reason why your cookies are better than anybody else's. Let's face it, one of the reasons we bake is we're so good, we like to show off. We bake for many reasons, but sometimes I think that's one of them. All right, so now I'm going to turn the mixer on to low speed, just to make sure nothing's going to fly into my face. And this is actually a relatively small batch. And lately I've been creating small batch recipes, and I noticed that my followers really, and my students really like it, because it gives you the opportunity to master the technique, and then you can always scale the recipe up. If you like the idea of small batch recipes to learn technique, please put it in the chat, because I always want to know that I'm on the right track. All right, so now, one thing that's important with creaming method is we gotta, right at the start, we have to scrape down. Okay, and then the other thing we have to do is we have to make sure that the paddle is also clear. And I have this old trick I use. I know it's another tool to dirty, and I apologize, but I like to get in here with my offset spatula to clean my paddle. All right, so it's really a relatively short time to get you to where we want to go with this creaming method. I'm going to go about 30 more seconds, but what's really important is our butter is retaining that bright yellow color. We're not taking this to light and fluffy. And as a matter of fact, if we overcream for our cookies and we go toward the light and fluffiness, that's where we end up with spread, because we've created air pockets that are too big for cookies. Great for cakes and muffins and cupcakes and all of that, but not for cookies. Cookies we cream for a relatively short time. Okay, about 30 more seconds. All right, that looks good. Let me show you one more time. Yeah, I think we're spot on. Now I'm going to add the egg in a couple increments, and you'll notice that it's parts for when we do small batch recipes, we end up with parts of an egg. And it is really important when you're working it with a smaller batch. I really do try, let me just say a disclaimer. I try to always create recipes that will use 1 egg, 2 egg, so that it's easy. But sometimes it doesn't work out. We end up using part of an egg. So what we do is you take an egg, you crack it, and I usually will use, let me show you. Oops, hold on. I'll use something like a jam jar, and then I'll take a small whisk or a fork, and I will beat the egg until it's completely homogenized, and then I will weigh out what we need. So that's how when you see, oh my God, 42 grams of an egg, when a large egg is usually 50 grams, that's how you do it. And then any leftover egg, well, you can use it for egg wash. It's good for about 36 hours, and then you got to toss it and move on from the refrigerator. Okay? All right. So now I'm going to add my egg ingredient. And I had my eggs out for about 45 minutes just to acclimate to the kitchen a little bit. I know there are parts of the world, I just think of being in Edinburgh and at the farm stores, and eggs just sat out all the time. But here in the US, we're pretty squirrely about eggs, so I just have them out for a short time. Now, sometimes we don't quite get the homogeneous mixture that we would like. And what you want to do is what I'm doing right now is just stop the mixer and get in there with your spatula. And as a matter of fact, these could be mixed by hand. If you're feeling, like a little bit, nostalgic, or you're like, you know what? Chef Colette, I'm not dragging out the mixer for these cookies. You could, if your butter is the right temperature, easily mix these by hand. So that's what, see, the egg is in, and it's pretty nicely homogenized. It's not broken. And I feel like I have questions. Oh, you guys like small batch recipes. Excellent. All right. Okay, great. Now, where is that? Remember this? This was our cornstarch, our all-purpose flour, our baking powder and salt all sifted together. And remember, the unusual thing about the alfajore is that the cornstarch is more than the flour. And that's rare, but that's going to contribute to that incredible texture of this cookie. So I'm just going to carefully add my flour. Just going to check my tray, make sure I haven't forgotten anything. Okay. Alrighty. And I will wipe down the table because I'm making a mess, typical. Now we only want to mix this until it comes together. That's it. I'm going to get this out of the way. And I'm going to you want to have a piece of plastic wrap or wax paper or parchment, because this dough is going to go in the refrigerator for at least an hour. It can sit in the refrigerator overnight, no problem. And it can also be frozen for up to 1 month. Again, I will at the end get in there with my spatula, so these can be made by hand. All right, so now we're gonna take this off the mixer, and it's really hugging the paddle, so I'm gonna scrape everything off. Okay, and then we wrap this in plastic wrap and chill it. It's a pretty soft dough. Again, with that cornstarch, we don't quite have the structure, but these are pretty much the best practices for any cookie dough that you are, any cut out cookie dough. Okay. So again, what's really important, it's still yellow. It's not white. And you know, when you're making a cake batter and a butter cake and you cream to light and fluffy, it can be an 8 to 10 minute mix on the mixer, and the batter or the dough is really light in color, because the larger the air, the more air pockets, the larger they get, the more air we whip in. It's actually light reflection that causes the dough or batter to look lighter. So that's what's happening, but we don't want that with the cookie. If we do that, we'll get spread. And we've all done it, right? I mean, that's the first thing that happens when we start baking, is the chocolate chip cookie pizza. I know I had that. All right, so now this is going in the fridge. I'm gonna move the mixer out of the way so you can see, and I'm gonna pull my chilled dough. So step one, make the dough, wrap. You can smack it down a little bit so it's about 1/2 inch thick, and refrigerate. Okay, so let me get the mixer out of the way. Wipe down my work surface so that this is civilized. All right, now, here's the dough after an hour. And I'm working in half batches, because what I want to do is roll this out and have it be a size that's manageable, that I can slide into the refrigerator, and then it's going to chill again. And this is the magic. This is the absolute. This is what I find to be really magical, to get beautifully clean, nice cuts on your cookies. All right, your cut out cookies. So the next thing that we are going to need is parchment paper. Because this cookie is so tender and lovely, I really don't want to introduce any more flour, so I'm not going to roll the cookie out in flour. It's also a super tender dough, and when we're working with doughs that are really tender, and what I mean by tender is butter, lots of sugar, fragile would be a better word. When we're working with those kind of doughs, we want to be able to slide them into the refrigerator if they need to chill, so we can really work with them. And that's what the pros do. So one of the first things you want to do is maybe make a space in the refrigerator so that you can slide your doughs in and out. All right. So I actually splurged and bought myself a box of parchment sheets that are they will fit a 1/2 sheet baking pan. And this is, to me, a luxury. And I really love this. But if you don't have this, then a lot of times at the supermarket, we get parchment paper on a roll. Just pull a sheet, like, this is 16, this is 12, at least big enough so you can roll out your dough. Okay, so no flour. No flour. And I also have something that I'm always on deck, that I'm always yammering about. If you watch my classes, I started this in my croissant class, Classic Croissants, Modern Techniques. I fell in love with the yardstick cut in half as a guide for rolling dough out. So this is a sandwich cookie, and sandwich cookies are typically, each of the cookie layers is 1/8 of an inch thick. We don't want to go too thick on the cookie layer, so we're going to roll the dough out between 1/4 and 1/8 of an inch thick. So here's the thing, this is what's so great about the parchment paper layers, is that when you're rolling your dough, you can sort of lean. I've got a little parchment paper here. I'm leaning into it. Forgive the noise. I'm going to tap it flat, and then I'm going to start to roll. I've got it tapped, about 5/8 of an inch. The paper does slide. See if I don't lean into it. And what's great about this is I just twirled it around. It worked great in rehearsal. All right, and then I like to use my yardstick as rails. And I also have these are called pastry rulers, or pastry rulers. You can find them online. They usually come in a set, but the yardstick cut in half is the least expensive. And then I just sand them down, because you can get splinters from them, so you got to be careful. But what's so cool is we use this as rails. So we can just roll the rolling pin back and forth, and then we can just peel up the parchment paper, which is really, really great. So again, since I do have these pastry rulers, and like I said, you can find them from online sources. They seem to be, these are old, I've had these quite a while. These are wood. You can also get them in, these days they seem to be made in silicone, which are easy to wash. All right, so I've been yammering on about rolling out dough. What you want to try to do is avoid, and that's why I like the sticks. Let me take the sticks away, and I want to show you what we want to avoid if possible. Watch. We go off the edge, and then we get that. And we suddenly have a portion of the dough that's just too thin. So this will go in our scrap, and it's kind of a bother. So that's why, something to use as a guide is great. And you might be saying, okay, Chef Colette, I can go for the yardstick. I'll go to Home Depot and get a yardstick and have them cut it in half, or I'll cut it in half and I'll sand it down. But this is a standard 1/4 inch, and you're telling me to cut this alfajore dough between 1/4 and 1/8. So what do we do? All right, let me show you. So we have our 1/4 inch, right? And now you want to roll the dough a little thinner, and it looks really good. So we're going to take those away. We're going to make sure we're nice and stable. We're going to take a nice breath, and with just firm, even pressure, we're going to go edge to edge and thin the dough out slightly. That's it. Just take your time at that step, and it's going to be successful. And then, you see, this is the game changer. If I tried to cut my circles out with this dough, there'd be a lot of stickage going on, and my edges would not be clean, they would not be pretty, and I would probably have thrown it into the fridge to chill them a little bit, but they wouldn't be sharp. They wouldn't have those nice, sharp, clean edges. And this is a technique that a lot of cookie bakers, the ones who we see on Instagram, and there's some marvelous cookie classes on Craftsy as well, who make those gorgeous decorated cookies. This is a tip I stole from them. Well, adapted. Okay, so magic of TV. So we're working small batch to master this dough. And I'm rolling out half batches of the dough at a time after it's rested in the refrigerator for a minimum of an hour. And then I have dough sheets, all right? So I'm gonna work one at a time, and if the dough is really cold, the magic just happens. Okay. So I have a baking tray right here. You always want to have, whoops, and I will make a lot of noise, I apologize. Just so many things to tell you and show you. So I have a parchment lined baking tray here. If you have you prefer silicone mats, you can use a silicone mat for this as well. Okay, and then I'm using holiday cookie cutters, but Alfajores are a year-round cookie. Usually they're cut with a pretty round fluted cutter. And I'm just gonna start. And we always want to start on the edge. And what works out so well, if the dough is cold, it lifts out with the cutter. And then you just drop it. You drop it like it's hot. And then we're just going to go around the edge of this dough. And you might be like, wow, that's not really very much dough at all. But again, I'm working small batch. I'm mastering the technique. And then you can just scale it up like no problem. But I would still be careful and work with smaller batches of dough. Maybe not this small, this is for teaching purposes, but still keep it small. This is the game changer right here. No fighting the edges. Put it in the comments if you like this, if you feel like it makes a difference, or if you've ever struggled with your cut out cookies. Having them stick and just not be a good situation. Now this scrappage, I'm going to keep, and what I'm gonna do, I don't wanna overhandle it. I can get 3 rolls out of this dough without the alfajore texture being compromised. And the reason for that is that ingredient function, the fact that it's more cornstarch than flour, and these have a high percentage of fat and sugar in them, because they're a cookie. I get a lot of requests for lower sugar items, and I know that there's a real need out there, but I have to say my wheelhouse is working with the regular cookie percentages. So this little piece of scrap, I'll re-roll later. I'm gonna just throw it in the fridge. And then I have this ready to go. And once again, and especially if you have an intricate cookie cutter, and there are some gorgeous cookie cutters out there, you can really succeed with this. Whoops, I just said that, and I had a snowflake break. This method really is great. So let me I'll cut up this dough and then I'm going to pop these. And if the dough is cold, they can go, and cold, like chef, how cold? We want it still to be cold to the back of your hand. I'll do one more and then I'm gonna stop. And I'm gonna pop these in the oven. The oven is at 350. And they take, now everybody's oven is different, but they take about 12 minutes, give or take. So let's see what happens. I think that'll be our final thing in class, is to look at these when they're done. Always set your timers, always. Okay, so now while those are baking, I'm gonna get some questions. Yes, Jenna, the dough can be made with a hand mixer on the lowest setting using if you have like all the beaters, different beaters, you want to use the standard beaters. And yes, Helen, the recipe calls for a small amount for some egg yolk and then also some whole egg. And again, ingredient function, you guys. The egg yolk is more of a tenderizer than the whole egg because egg white has protein in it, 10% protein in it, and that is a strengthener. So a little bit of balance there gives the whole egg gives us some structure, and then the egg yolk keeps us on the tender side. Oh, great. Anita, I'm so glad this was helpful. I was determined, and it was another reason that I chose the Alfajore when my Craftsy supervisor said, hey, what cookie do you want to do? I thought, I can really, maybe I can hit on some good points to help you be successful. And then again, as I said in my intro, this is kind of a challenging dough with it being a little bit more tender. So it is really, it is a good one. Like when we master it, it's like, yes, this works. So let me pull this. I want to show you the finished baked. I think that's it for questions right now. The other thing that I did want to say is there's some beautiful cookie decorating classes on Craftsy. And I think there's a couple too on Creative Cake Design channel. So there's so much content out there. But if you're looking and so great recipes as well. But for myself, I have a class called French Pastry Shop Classics. And in that class is a pâte sucrée. It's the dough that's used for the fresh fruit tart. And that dough makes wonderful sugar cookies. So I just that was kind of flitting in the back of my mind, and I wanted to mention that to you guys. Okay, so now I have talked to you about this dough, and you can see that this is one of the most tender doughs in the cookie roster or lexicon or the world of cookies, right? But with careful handling, chilling the dough sheet, we have good definition, really, really great definition. So I'm really quite happy with these, all right? And so I just wanted to talk about that. The Alfajore is not going to be as incredibly crisp as a traditional sugar cookie dough, but the flavor is and the texture is just phenomenal. Like you literally want to make yourself a cup of coffee or a pot of tea or get a good tall glass of milk when you see these and just dive right in. So I'm gonna show you how to finish them. And then I'm gonna talk just briefly a little bit about the history of the alfajore and just how incredibly popular and kind of the different guises you can see them in, especially if you go to Central and South Latin America. It'll be like, whoa. All right. I don't think in the States and I'm going to rope Canada into this too. I don't think we vary a cookie regionally like you'll see the alfajores. All right, so now let's go. So I'm just going to make sure that I'm organized for finishing, and I have a tray. Where's my tray? Huh. I might be losing my mind. The great thing about the alfajores is that the filling we can buy. Now I know DIY, I love to DIY too, but we're busy people. So we can, it looks like this. Let me get it so you guys can see. It is already caramelized condensed milk. It's made by Nestle. The brand is La Lechera. And the difference between a can of condensed milk and Dulce de Leche is the Dulce will always have like a tan or brown label. Now, you can absolutely DIY Dulce de Leche from a can of condensed milk, and I have those directions in the recipe. I like to do it in the oven. I'm not a fan of the stovetop, and I cannot emphasize enough that the condensed milk must come out of the can for this. Back in the day, and I remember working in restaurants and cafes where the can was put on the stove and boiled, and it's amazing that it didn't blow up. And I mean a big number 10 can, flat out miracle. No, we're gonna do this the safe way, taking it out of the can, and then setting it up the way I describe in the recipe. All right, but and the one that you wanna avoid is the Dulce in the tube. It's always too soft, but the one in the can is amazing. All right, so now I have my cookies and I'm gonna line up tops and bottoms. And I like to use, it's up to you guys, and you could spread the Dulce in, you don't need to pipe, but I'm just using a small open star tip because I think it looks kind of cool. And then one thing that I like to teach, because it's a little bit of a finesse point, is that if let's say you want to garnish with powdered sugar, you want to garnish the top of a cookie or maybe a cream puff or something with powdered sugar. It's really nice to do that separate from the whole item. It makes things a little bit tidier. So I'm going to grab my strainer and my powdered sugar. I have designed this kitchen so that it's designed pretty much completely for this kind of thing to be on camera where I can grab whatever I need. So I'm just gonna powder sugar these little treetops and then flip these over. So I'm all set and ready to go. And the same for my snowflakes. Okay. And then you're just going to oh, I knew that was going to happen, you guys. I knew it. I called it. See, we're live, of course. My bag broke. Hilarious. All right, just hold on 1 second, and I'm going to grab another piping bag. Wow, that was just too predictable. But you know what? That's good for you guys to see, because you're like, well, what do I do when that happens? Well, I'm gonna grab another bag, and I don't mean to be the enemy of the planet. I do rewash these. I really try to reuse them until they're unusable. I'm gonna just dump the whole thing in this new bag. And yeah, we're just gonna go from there. We're gonna lose just a few minutes, but no big deal. Okay, we'll be okay. Look, drop it in, push it down, see? Teaching moment. Actually, I planned the whole thing. No, I certainly didn't. That was a make it work moment. Now I'm gonna leave a little bit of a border, because when I pop that top on, I do have to just sort of make sure that they are connecting. So, and for those of you who like to pipe, this is so much fun. And you know, at the bottom of the recipe, I also have other uses for dulce de leche. It's really versatile and it's really good. And as someone said in our pre-show comments, like when it was up on the Craftsy site, it makes a delicious cake filling, and you can add it to a buttercream as well. Really, really great. So we have our pretty piped filling showing right there. And I'm just going to get these little stars. Now the other thing, it's the holidays, right? And you might really enjoy working with royal icing. You've got your holiday cutters. There's no reason why you can't have a little fun with royal icing. Here, let me make these kind of pretty here so that it's not messy. But you can, I have this royal icing in a cornet. You can also use a piping bag, but you can have fun and decorate your tops before you put the cookies together. And if you like them to be decorated on both sides, that's fine too. I'm just gonna ooh, perfect. Yep, they're done. Hold on. All right, everybody. Whoops. Let me grab my other oven mitt so I don't burn myself, because that'll be the next thing. So this is what we're looking for. We're looking for them to be fully baked. They can have a little tinge around the edges. That's totally fine. But we don't want them over browned. And we also, on the flip side of that, we don't want them to look raw. So, and what would raw look like in a dough like this? You would still be able to see the sparkle from the sugar, and it would be, see how opaque they are? They would be much less opaque. All right. Okay, now the last thing, they can also be garnished with coconut. You can roll the edges of the filled alfajores in coconut. And as a matter of fact, when you see them in Mexico, they're usually garnished with coconut. I'm using an unsweetened coconut, but you could use sweetened coconut. But here's what I always recommend, and that is when you're garnishing with coconut, give it a light toast, because raw coconut isn't that pleasant to eat, even when it's been dredged in a lot of sugar. So just 350 for about 5 minutes, and you get a pretty little toast on your coconut, and it's just more pleasant. And now, if you are using like sweetened coconut and the strands of coconut are long, you can toast and then just chop them up with a knife, and they'll be a little bit more manageable for garnish. All right. So I'm going to just fill this last little gingerbread person and then take any questions, and then we will wrap up for today. And I hope maybe today you have time to get into the kitchen and bake a batch, at least make the dough. Again, you can freeze it for up to a month, and it'll stay just fine in the refrigerator. I would say about 2-3 days. It has enough sugar and butter in it for it to hold. What we have to watch out for is doughs that, like a pie dough, that doesn't have a lot of sugar and a lot of fat in them. They can sometimes turn gray because the flour is oxidizing. But that won't happen with a full fat, high sugar, lovely, lemon scented, vanilla kissed alfajore. All right, you guys, look at that. So cute, huh? So, oh, and snowflakes as well. So the whole point of our 12 days of cookies here at Craftsy is for you to have some wonderful new recipes to try, exercise the baking skills, enjoy the hobby you love, and just be creative. And please tag us in your beautiful bakes. So before I wrap, let me take questions. Oh, good, Jenna, see? That's how you handle it. That's it. And that's what the pros do too, because in a professional baking environment, a pastry kitchen, it happens all the time. So, okay, Juanita, yes. This will be our final question, and we'll pretty much be done. You can always, send questions. That's totally fine if you think of them. But I can't stress this enough. When you are making a dough that you are rolling out, like a cookie dough, a pie dough, and certainly something like a sweet dough with yeast in it, you want to be using all-purpose, unbleached flour. All right. Now, normally in our bread recipes, we're using bread flour. And most of the time, the major brands like Gold Medal, Better for Bread, Bob's Red Mill, and King Arthur, they're all unbleached because the bleaching process affects gluten formation. Now, I'm not going to nerd out on you too much, but just suffice it to say that the bleaching process we create gluten when we mix that cookie dough. That's why we're so careful to just mix until the flour disappears, because we don't want these tough, we want them to be tender, all right? So bleached flour does make a difference. Now, I teach for a culinary school and I'm evaluating product all the time, and I can tell when my students are using bleached flour and when they're using unbleached flour. And here's the problem, and I'm almost done. So please, for your all-purpose flour, always check the label and make sure it says unbleached. Your baking results will be so much better and nothing will fight you. Now, I want the one shout out for bleached flour is cakes. Certain kinds of cakes, especially when the amount of sugar is higher than the flour, they benefit from bleached cake flour because that bleaching process helps with sugar absorption. So that's where we want our bleached cake flour, but otherwise we don't. So Juanita, I'm sorry for I really went off on a tangent here, but I cannot stress it enough. The problem is, and this is the last thing I promise, is the store brands and the brands that go on sale at the holiday time, they are 99.9% of the time bleached flour. And the reason for that is bleached flour lasts longer on the shelf. And so it's usually a lesser grain, because grain is commoditized. Grain is the better brands buy the better crops, and it all goes down. There's a word for that I'm not thinking of right now. I wanted to say commodity, but I'm not sure, so I'm going to stop. Just please buy unbleached all-purpose flour for your baking, and your baking life will be better. I wish that all unbleached, all-purpose flour was unbleached on the market. But I see it all the time. Juanita, that was an excellent question. And now you know. All right, everyone, thank you for joining me in the kitchen. And I hope you enjoyed this tutorial and demo on alfajores. And this is a year-round cookie, so I hope you're inspired to give them a try. Again, thank you so much. And yeah, we did really well. Again, I will monitor the Alfajore page. And if you have questions, just drop them in and I'll get those answered. All right, you guys, stay safe, happy holidays, and enjoy your baking.